Hi friends, a lot of us are feeling the pinch at the moment and finances are really tight. So I wanted to bring you a video this week to show you 5 different meal ideas that will help to bring your grocery budget down. And there are 2 ways that I'm going to be doing this. The first one is by using leftover meat, which is what I'm doing tonight. We had chicken yesterday and I have some leftover chicken that I'm going to be putting in a risotto. I'm going to be using plenty of rice to bulk it out, some courgettes, some onion, some garlic, and homemade bone broth that I made earlier, well, a couple of weeks ago now, that's been in the freezer. And that's going to make a really nutritious, filling meal for very little money. The other thing that I'm going to be doing is adding beans and lentils to some meals to make the meat go further and to bulk out the meal so that it's more filling and more nutritious, and it will really keep the costs down. So if you're interested in finding some different ideas for cheap meals you can make for your family, make sure you watch to the end to get all of the different ideas. So risotto is a very last minute meal and I'm going to have to make it later on this evening, but I want to get ahead of myself a little bit and prepare the vegetables and the chicken so that they're all ready to go after the children get home from school. So I didn't get everything prepared that I wanted to before I went to get the boys from school. I did that off camera. Now everything's ready to go for this risotto. I'm calling this a risotto, but I'm using the term very, very loosely. I am aware that this is not a real Italian risotto. First thing I'm doing is frying the vegetables, so the onions and the leeks and the garlic. Then I'm going to add the rice and fry it until it's just slightly translucent. Now I did realise very quickly that this pan was not going to be big enough because I always make double quantities in the evening so that my children can have leftovers for lunch when they take their lunch to school the next day. So this ended up being a huge amount of risotto. I wouldn't necessarily recommend making this much at once. It's the kind of meal that it's better when you make a little bit at a time. But it was still very tasty in the end and my children really enjoyed it. It's just it wasn't particularly easy to make. Now that the vegetables are tender and the rice is translucent, I'm adding the bone broth. I'm adding about the same volume of bone broth that I did rice, and I'm going to let that come to a simmer and just cook down gently. As the rice absorbs the liquid, I'm adding some more water until the rice is cooked through. Some people like to have a bit of a bite to the rice. I prefer it when it's well cooked. So when the rice is nice and tender, I'm adding the leftover chicken, and I also found some spinach in the fridge that needed to be eaten up, so I'm adding that too. Before I add anything else, I'm taking out what I need for my 2 boys that have food allergies. Then I'm going to add a huge chunk of butter and some parmesan, and this is what makes the risotto really creamy. This is a great meal for using up leftover meat, bits and bobs of vegetables that you've got left over in the fridge, and everybody really enjoyed it, so it makes me think that I should be making it more often. Tonight's meal is a completely meatless one. It's a lentil dal curry and I'm serving it with some garlic naans I've just put together earlier on. It's been resting and it's ready to be rolled out and cooked in the pan. So I'm going to get on and make the curry, and I will fry up those naans and keep them warm until dinner tonight. And I will probably make some rice to go with it, just to bulk it out even further, and a little bit of yogurt and cucumber dip. So I've added the spices to the pot. I've got 2 teaspoons of turmeric, 1 teaspoon of cumin, 1 teaspoon of coriander, 1 teaspoon of ground ginger. Now I would normally prefer to use fresh ginger, but I didn't have any today. And 1 teaspoon of garam masala. You do need to be a bit careful of garam masala because it can be quite spicy. So make sure you try it before you put a whole load in there, because sometimes the children will have difficulty eating it if it's too spicy. So those are my spices, and they're frying a little bit with the onions. That just helps to bring their flavours out. And now I'm going to add the wet ingredients. I added 1 can of chopped tomatoes, 1 can of coconut milk, 350 grams of red lentils that I've just rinsed off, and about 500 millilitres of stock. About a teaspoon and a half of salt. So I've used some chicken stock that I had. In fact, it might even have been pork stock, but you can make this dish completely vegetarian if you use vegetable stock. I'm going to bring it to the boil and then cover it and let it simmer for about 20 minutes or until the lentils are cooked. You can add some vegetables to this if you like. It's really good with sweet potatoes or with butternut squash. And I have a recipe for this. If you go over to my website, you can download a free budget cookbook which has a similar recipe to this in it, and 4 other recipes that are absolutely delicious and very, very low budget. While the curry is simmering, I'm going to get on and make the yogurt and cucumber side dish. This dish is called raita. I don't think I'm making it the traditional way. All I'm doing is cutting up some cucumber into very, very small chunks. Then I'm going to mix it with a few tablespoons of homemade yogurt, and I'm going to add a little bit of salt. You could also sprinkle paprika over the top, or even add a little bit of garam masala to the yogurt, but I prefer to keep it plain. For my boys who are allergic to dairy, I'm just cutting up some cucumber for them to have on the side. Now I'm going to roll out and cook the naans that I made earlier. I will try and leave the link for these naans in the description box below. They were very, very tasty. I used freshly milled flour and they turned out really well. These are really easy to roll out because they don't need to be too thin. And if you shape them into balls and leave them on your counter for about 5 minutes, they'll be even easier to roll out. I'm going to fry them in a very hot cast iron pan for a few minutes on each side until they're nice and golden brown. When they come out of the pan, I'm going to brush them with an olive oil and garlic mixture. Now this is even better if you can use butter, but because some of my family are dairy free, I'm using olive oil instead. These were real treats to go with our delicious lentil curry. tonight's dinner is chili con carne, and I'm not using very much meat. I'm going to bulk it out with beans and serve it with rice so that it'll go a bit further. And you'll see this is a really quick dinner to make as well. I'm going to chop up some onions to add to the meat, and also I've got a couple of half peppers that are going a bit soft in the fridge, so I'm going to pop them in there too. So I forgot to press record, but in here I've got 2 teaspoons of ground garlic, 2 teaspoons of smoked paprika, 1 teaspoon of cumin and 1 teaspoon of ground coriander. I've put 1 tin of crushed tomatoes in there. I've got red and white beans, and I put 4 of these jars in there, so 350 grams each. So that's really going to bulk out the chili. And I've just added some stock that I made from chicken bones yesterday to cover the meat, and now I'm going to add some salt. I'm going to cook this on high pressure for 30 minutes. So what makes chili a really nice meal is the toppings. And even on a budget, I think you can get some really tasty toppings. So I'm going to make some pickled onions. I might sprinkle some coriander on the top that I've got growing in the garden. And you can put a scoop of sour cream. You can put a sprinkle of cheese, whatever your budget will stretch to. You can make pickled onions from scratch for pennies, especially if you use pickle juice from a previous batch like I'm doing here. This next meal I'm making leek and mushroom quiches. Now I made the quiche base earlier and it's been in the fridge for several hours, so I'm going to get it out and roll it now. I made this quiche base from duck fat. It was a bit of an experiment, but it did work. And I'm really glad because my boys that are dairy free were able to enjoy a delicious quiche. Duck fat has a higher fat content than butter, so I think I need to reduce the amount of duck fat that I put in there, but I will definitely be working on this recipe because it gave a great flavour to the pastry. I've got several quiche recipes over on the blog, as well as my sourdough pastry crust, so I'll be sure to link those in the description box below. I find that blind baking your pastry is one of the biggest keys to success when you're making quiche. So I always do this. I prick the base with a fork, I cover it with baking parchment, add my baking beads or lentils in my case, and then I'll bake it in the oven for about 15 minutes before I add the topping. And while it's baking in the oven, I can get on with all of the other ingredients. So now I'm just frying off some leeks, cutting up some mushrooms, and I'll be frying those too. And then I'm going to be making the egg mixture to go in the quiche. making 2 quiches today. I'm doing one dairy-free and one not dairy-free. So that's why I've got 2 bowls. Into each filling goes 4 eggs, 400 milliliters of some kind of milk, so normal milk or almond milk, some salt, you can add some nutmeg as well if you like, and then 3 tablespoons of some kind of flour, so it can be normal wheat flour, corn flour or rice flour. Whisk that up until you get a nice smooth mixture. I love to spread mustard on the bottom of the quiche. I think it adds a great flavour to the filling. Another tip for you is to add your cheese right to the filling mixture. I find that this spreads the cheese flavour throughout the quiche rather than weighing down the egg mixture if you sprinkle it on the top. I didn't add any kind of cheese to the dairy-free one, and to be honest, you don't really miss it, so if you season it well enough, you can leave out the cheese really easily. Now it goes back into the oven for another 20 minutes. I'm going to serve this quiche with an endive salad. So endive is also called chicory. It's a white vegetable that is very popular here in France, and we like to have it in a salad with apples. There will be a recipe on the blog for this salad very soon, so keep your eye out for that. We love it with this lemon poppy seed dressing, which will also be up on the blog soon. This salad is the perfect mixture of sweet, sour and bitter. It's absolutely delicious. Friday lunchtime and I need to get dinner on for tonight because I'm about to go out to work, and this evening my husband and I are doing a concert, so it's going to be a real rush to get out on time, and I want to make sure everything is ready for dinner before I go to work. So today I'm making a minced pork and cabbage stir fry. Now minced pork is quite a cheap cut of meat, and cabbage is also very cheap if you buy it in season. So that's what I'm doing today. I think it'll be really good. Lots of nice Asian flavours, a little bit of soy sauce, a little bit of sesame seed oil. It's going to be really tasty. I've just added the onions to the meat and I'm frying them together gently so that the onions will soften. And now I am cutting up this cabbage really finely, well as finely as I can. I'm going to rinse it off in a colander and put it with the meat and the onions. I'm adding garlic and the cabbage and a good glug of soy sauce, which will be the only seasoning. That's everything in the stir fry now. I'm just going to let it cook down nice and gently until the meat is cooked through and the cabbage is nice and soft. I'll taste it later and maybe add a bit more soy sauce or maybe some salt. And before I serve it, I will drizzle it with some sesame seed oil. I'm going to serve this with just plain white rice, and I think it's going to taste really good. Thank you for following along with me this week. I hope you enjoyed the different recipes, and I hope I gave you some ideas of some budget-friendly meals that you can make for your family. If you have any other ideas of cheap recipes that your family loves, why don't you leave me a comment below and we can share ideas. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye!